Just a reminder, everybody, hold the microphones up and close. Good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and we are going to entertain a public hearing. Tanya is not able to be with us this morning. Her son is having some procedure, and so I'm going to turn that over to the young boss lady, Kathy.
Hi, everyone. We can start off today's meeting then with public comment, correct?
Correct.
At 9:30. So, all right. I think Lisa or Tanya is going to try to call in when available, though.
Okay. Is there anybody upstairs in a public comment room, or? I don't believe so. Is there, Chief? Okay, thank you. First of all, we have a young lady that this is your first time. So everybody, you want to start with you, Kathy, and introduce yourself so she has everything correct in the minutes.
I am Kathy Gingers, the Business and Operation Manager.
Joe Demling, County Board.
Fran Duncanson, Supervisor, District 12.
Vince Netherland, County Administrator. Chad Roberts, General Government Director.
John Bonifaz, HS Chair. So that's our introduction. Cassie, got anything else? Explain what public comments. Yep.
This is Amy Middleton. Sorry to hop in here, but I'm also on here.
Good morning, Amy. Appreciate
Thank you.
participation.
Appreciate you putting me on here. I'll mute now.
So, Vince, do we open for public comments? If there's none, do we adjourn the public comment session, or are they eligible for anything between 9:30 and 10?
I definitely recommend keeping it open for a few more minutes, but then normally I asked Tanya in the past, if no one is here to make comments, then we close it. And so I'd maybe give them another 10 minutes to a quarter till to see if anybody else comes on.
Kathy, you don't have anything written under public comment. And what would the comments pertain to? Do you have any more?
I believe it's on budget, correct?
Right. I think if people have want us to make us aware of concerns and where they would like our budget preparation to focus going forward, if it's anything different than we're doing now.
I've been in touch with Tanya, and she seems to think our budget is pretty much on track, which is kind of surprising. The situation with the COVID.
Yeah, I can tell you that Tanya and her staff had a remarkable 2019 in coming in on budget, and they're working very hard to be efficient with their money and to target it where it's needed. As you know, over time, the needs of the community shift. Resources from the state shift. And so Tanya, I think, has shown the ability to adapt to those changes and institute change in her division.
We're sure happy, fortunate, basically, to have her expertise, her extra concerns and everything, and keeping us pretty much up to normal. Vince, do you want to give us an update on the COVID? Can you do that at this time? Or does it have to be during the regular meeting?
Pardon? That probably should be in the regular meeting.
Okay.
And so on.
As far as you know, there isn't anything urgent, no outbreak. Golden Age Manor is okay.
Nothing new. We can discuss that at 10, I think. Or
Bill, did you have something?
I do. Just real quick, as far as the community services division, is there any major changes on contracted services going up, going down as far as? You're into August already, so just a thought.
We are evaluating certain contracts. Are there certain ones of significance? We have cut some contracts. ABC Rural, we put out a proposal to them, waiting for a response. It is less, but it's based on our analysis that we are providing certain services and need them for specific things and not others. So we're saving the taxpayers money in that respect, providing the service that they want.
Okay.
That's just one of them.
Right.
We're waiting for the reply from ABC Rural.
Anything with foster care going up, going down, or contracted services as far as mental health?
I have not worked on that specifically, so I can't tell you. I don't know, Kathy, if you have.
I know we looked at them like last month and they were looking pretty status quo. Those are those things that can change next month though too, so right now we're looking pretty.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Bill, we're in kind of just a general session, kind of a holding pattern here. Do you have anything new as far as from your unity? They kind of spearhead everything as far as health and schools and that area.
I don't have any updates right now. We're still looking at, I guess the major concern that I hear is sports schedules. For example, with football being not starting until September 7th and games not coming in until the week of the 23rd, about 2/3 of the season has been canceled. So being in contact with athletic directors, they haven't put together a final schedule yet as to what they're going to do. But other than that, I think most of the schools are ready to go. I know my daughter teaches over in Minnesota in Stillwater, and they're going back next Monday. So it'll be interesting.
My kid's going Wednesday, brother.
Yeah, it sure looked Minnesota. My grandson's the head football coach at North Branch, and they were just ready to hit the field. And now Minnesota, for contact sports, volleyball, football, some other, they're put off until next spring. And Wisconsin WIA had the big meeting on Friday, and I think most people thought that they were going to follow that. But then if you got the press conference from President Dodd, shockingly, everything in Wisconsin is status quo as their last announcement, which you made is correct. Could change day by day.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be some outbreaks. There's no doubt about that.
Now, it'll be interesting. We'll see.
I think the big thing in Polk County is I think we've got about 9 senior care places and probably about 40 assisted livings in that. And knock on wood, we've been clear and free. Well, I think we'll just kind of hang out till 9:45, and then we'll have a motion to close the public hearing. Fran, is there anything new as far as you know, being part of the administration in Osceola and representing Amory?
Well, as it pertains to the health and human services.
Yes.
or COVID or,
Anything in general?
yeah, we're still, our building isn't locked down, but, we're masking now even in our offices. we, want to set an example, for people when they come in that we're setting wearing masks also. We are encouraging people to use a Dropbox each payments to kind of limit their public contact. The library is open by appointment only, and that's been working good. And then
I'm confused about that. Is there actually, can people actually vote around the United States, or is it by county or what? Can you actually vote for presidential election already?
so the way that it's been is that we set their own hours for early voting. Now that's limited to leading up to the election. Is the only time we vote early. People can still vote absentee by mail. They want to mail their ballots back in the Dropbox, drop them off at whatever they're comfortable doing. Check the ballot. I'm inundated with that ballot. And they're not available yet. So I think I'm gonna probably write it in our paper. Just to kind of for informational purposes.
45 days would be when, September 20th.
Yeah.
Good date to know.
And then, I ordered 800, but I had to.
That's, no, you're just talking Village of Osceola. Now, Osceola being a border town, I know you have contact every day with people from Minnesota. So I suppose you kind of got to be familiar with what they're doing too.
Well, I learned a little bit about how Minnesota does things in the year that I worked there. But if they're not residents of the Village of Osceola, we don't really take care of any of, their needs. They can't vote in the Village of Osceola unless they're a registered voter and a resident there. So we try to steer them in the right direction now. But, it's confusing to a lot of people that come across the border in the border town.
Yeah.
From Minnesota, and the thing is they have an Osceola address that they live in the Village of Osceola, and they live in Farmington, town Osceola, or in a rural area, but because their address is Osceola, but they should vote, at in the village hall when we need to send them someplace else. So we screen a lot of that and just try to point people in the right direction and let them know. The residency requirement is changed too. Sometimes they have to vote where they move from. It's 28 days now.
Okay, that's the key that I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Is the time.
It was 10 days for Medicare. Then it got changed to 20 days, and then it went to 30 days. And while it was in the court process, it went back to 10 for 3 years. And now the appeals court finally ruled, and so now it's 28 days.
Isn't that interesting?
So,
These court cases.
yeah, it just changes in the fly all the time, So, they have to live there 28 days if they're like seeking residency. So Wisconsin has a pretty strict process. So that helps.
The township of Franconia, which is right across the river from Osceola, their whole township, I don't know what the legal language is, but they've all committed as a school district to the Osceola district. And Osceola runs a bus over in Minnesota. And there's people from all over, all clear. Was just I had an MIRA done in Stillwater. And she said, "You're from Osceola?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I graduated from Forest Lake. I live in Forest Lake, and I take my kids to a drop-off point where they catch the bus and go to Osceola." It's just incredible between the two states, and you know,
Hey, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
correct.
Can this is Amy. Can we all use our mics and including reminding the speakers to use mics? I can hear you really well, but I can't hear Fran. I didn't hear any of that piece. Thank you.
We're kind of waiting out the public hearing here and just kind
Oh,
of
okay.
chatting.
You're just chit-chatting. Okay. Okay.
Chit-chatting.
No worries.
That's it, exactly. We're just passing some time, Amy.
Okay.
Do you want to move to close the public hearing?
Would you like me to do that?
Sharon Kelly. So we have a motion by Supervisor Duncanson, Joey seconded to close a public hearing. Motion and seconded, Madam Clerk. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So now we can have some more chit chat, I guess. That's what Amy called it. Yes. You okay, Chief?
Yeah, so just following up on some kind of housekeeping matters, and I know Joe hasn't probably heard this yet. Fran's heard about it. Talked to a couple other supervisors, and one of the things we're going to do at our county board meetings is due to the fact that it seems like there's been some issues with the quorum and with the WebEx and with just kind of being professional. We've been having a lot of some supervisors that are doing WebEx and not realizing they're muted or not muted, and getting up during the meeting and taking care of business, or someone comes to the door or the phone rings. So I've talked to IT and administrator about this, that we're going to put everyone on mute. So, when we have votes, we're going to vote. You're going to have to raise your hand if you're on WebEx, or you're going to have to find a way to communicate with staff in a text message or something. But we're not going to allow the background noise. We're going to ask people that are on WebEx, if you're a supervisor or on a committee, that you're gonna treat it as if you were sitting here in the room, and not have outside noises, dogs barking, family members walking in the room, whatever. So just kind of giving everyone the heads up that everyone will be on mute, and when there's a time for a vote, we will take you off mute so you can vote. We've also talked to a couple of supervisors that are concerned about wearing the masks, or people not wearing the masks, that we're actually going to set up basically, a kind of a little more of a room that is a safe room. We're going to use the county board chair's office. I don't use it very often at all, but we'll make sure that it's clean, or we'll make sure there's another room that's clean. And we're asking supervisors that can attend, but the reason they're not attending, one supervisor is fine to come to committee meetings because there's only a few people in the room and we're spread out well, but he's a little concerned when he comes to the county board and we're all in this room together like you are today, and some people choose to wear a mask and some don't, or they're being taken off. So I respect those concerns, but we're not going to let you just stay at home for the next year doing WebEx meetings and having the audio problems, and when we go into closed session, we're dropping people and then they can't get back on, and it's very unprofessional. So what we're going to say is, if that's your concerns, we'll give you a room. We can control the audio, we can control the video, and if we're having problems, we'll go get you to come into the room to make a vote, and you can go back. So I just wanted to go to every committee and kind of talk to them about those issues. The other issue is on the agenda, and we've been talking about it, on the process at county board, that we're getting into these big discussions, and these discussions kind of spill over to staff and other parts of the building. And we need to get back, and we have some new supervisors, and we had old rules of order too. Old rules of order kind of allowed supervisors to kind of go to administrator, go to corporate counsel, kind of work behind the scenes to generate resolutions. And in the new rules of order, we have 4 ways of generating resolutions: one through a committee, one through corporation counsel, or the administrator, or the county board chair. And we're going to try to keep it to that. And we're going to keep it to that because we want everything to be done up front and in front of the public viewing. And what's happened lately, especially on the CAFO issue, we've had supervisors concerned about the process, concerned about feeling like they're running up against the wall. And what they've done is they've actually asked the administrator, they've questioned corporation counsel, and they've questioned Wisconsin Counties Association counsel. And again, it's fine to question it, but for 4 supervisors to sign a letter and send it to the administrator to seek outside counsel is not proper, and we just can't do that. We also had another supervisor asking for, on a separate issue, that other supervisor also got a letter asking for corporation counsel to make some legal opinions. And again, our administrator, our corporation counsel,
all the staff, zoning departments, health directors, all the people that work in health departments, their staff. And we're not supposed to be micromanaging staff. We're supposed to set policy. We're supposed to do it in committee. If we don't like the way it's going, you vote on it. You get it on the agenda. And we just have to get a little handle on that. We talked about in executive committee meeting that supervisors that want to go in a direction, it's simply getting a vote. 8 to 7, you can keep moving along. If you can't get 8 to 7, then it's kind of a done deal. But if you want outside counsel, you bring it to your committee. You see if your committee will ask that question. But you got to remember again, zoning, land and water, health, Malia, the only person that works for us is Vince, our county administrator, Mr. Netherland. We can go to him, but we are not supposed to be going to staff asking them to do things for us. And we need to get back to really, if we want a discussion and we want things to go a different direction, there's not a chair on any of our committees that is not going to allow you to put it on the agenda. So just a little housekeeping we want to do. We want to try to get over this little hump and this little contentious issue we're in right now and get back to just doing business in committees and moving it to the county board. So that's all I really had to say, and we'll try to keep making it safe, and we do ask everyone to wear masks. And if you can't wear one, that's fine. But at a county board too, I don't really want to get into big discussions about this. Any supervisors that have issues or have issues with administration or have issues with corporation counsel, they can certainly bring them to the county board chair, and issues with the mask too. So thanks, John.
Thanks for That's my fault. Did you have another comment or just?
No, that was it, just that
The only thing I'd say is, we know that the divisional director, Tanya Eichelt, is not here today. She had a matter she had to attend to. So now Kathy Gringus is here, and we have a few others I see here, Lisa Lassver, and anybody else, but we will proceed as expected.
Okay. Kathy, did you have anything on number 10?
I do not have anything
Oh,
on
okay.
10.
Moving on to number 11, reports and presentations, DNR presentation permitting process, Jeff Jackson from the Wisconsin DNR. I believe Jeff is out of Baldwin. Do you want, have you got a microphone there? I remember back, I don't know, several months ago, and we have some new supervisors now, and so that would be really helpful to them if you tell about your permitting process, about your responsibilities, and whatever you have there for information for us. Welcome. We appreciate you being in Polk County. And it should come on green.
There we go. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to orient myself here. Yes. Let's see. Yep. So it's a PDF, so let's have to go slide by slide. All right, so I'm Jeff Jackson. I'm out of the Baldwin office. I'm a regional CAFO specialist. I also, another title we use is ag runoff specialist as well. Next slide. First presentation with the mask, so it's kind of weird to me right now yet, but. All right, so I wanted to first define what a CAFO is. So we're talking concentrated animal operations, and we generally have two different categories. The most common is what's considered a large CAFO, and that's an operation that has 1,000 animal units or more. And if your operation has 1,000 animal units or more, they're required to have a permit. We also have the ability to permit small to medium-sized farms and designate them as a small to medium-sized CAFO. And then that means that operation could in fact have less than 1,000 animal units. And generally that's based on a history of discharge that has not been rectified. And then to kind of get an idea of what 1,000 animal units is, depending on what type of animal, we're generally looking at 714 milking cows, equivalent to 1,000 steers, 2,500 sows, or 55,550 turkeys. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to show everybody what some of these places look like. So both of these two images are hog farms that one I'm currently working with and the other one I previously worked with. So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is a hog operation that has 3,200 animal units. You're going to see that these buildings here all have under-barn manure storage. The one on the right, a little bit different setup. Now, these three barns also have under-barn manure storage, but instead of having a great big, deep, 8-foot lagoon, these buildings are designed to have approximately 2.5 to 3 feet deep, and they're able to store some manure there, but the majority of it gravity flows to the waste storage lagoon that you can see on the left there. And to kind of get an idea where these are, This one's in Jackson County, this one's in Buffalo County.
Thanks for clearing that up, that they aren't in Polk County.
Next slide.
I'm getting worried.
So these are a couple of areas that I've worked with in the past. Obviously a little bit different. We're gonna have, so on the right here, this is a farm I worked with in Fond du Lac County a couple of years ago. Here's your freestyle barns. Your feed storage area is right here. This operation decided to have feed in their feed bags. And then the feed big, where storage begins. And actually there's one over here as well. And then the one on the left, that's a farm I used to work with in Calumet County. A lot bigger, actually quite a bit bigger, 5,270 animal units. And again, a little bit differently, and so instead of bagging their feed, they would actually put it in these big feed bunkers.
Was there about how many milk cows there is on that area?
I don't remember on that one, because so with that farm, they basically had all their stock, all their livestock on that site. So that included calves, young stock, and milking cows. So it was a mix of everything, really. All right, next slide. So this is the animal unit form that we use. We're going to have two ways of designating the animal unit totals. These are the federal numbers here. These are what we have in the state of Wisconsin under our own codes. They're pretty similar on how you calculate them. The main thing is, in Wisconsin, we can look at various animal types and lump them all together. So we can count how many cows you have, how many steers you have. Let's say you're in an operation that was diverse and had turkeys as well. We could all lump that together to see if you had 1,000 animal units or more. On the federal side, then more or less going to be looking at your highest one animal type to determine if you're at 1,000 animal units. We do have the ability to look at either one, and if you're over 1,000 on either one, we can permit you. So it's a little confusing, but in general, we look at what we have for our state statutes. So that'll be the numbers on the left-hand side. And as you can see, there's all different types, because in Wisconsin, we're going to have dairy CAFOs, we have turkey CAFOs, hog, chicken, and we have duck as well. All right, next slide. Okay, let's talk about the permit a little bit here. So if you want to go one more slide for me. So the CAFO permit, there's a lot to it. We're not going to be here all day if you really wanted to get through everything, so Buddy's kind of highlighted some things. And actually, as we go, if there are questions, feel free to ask me as we go. So our requirements are listed in chapter NR 243, which is what we use to both permit and kind of monitor the farms that we work with. It's a water quality protection permit, and that's really important to understand. This permit implements EPA Clean Water Act, and regulates CAFO manure and processed wastewater handling, storage, and land application. And back to the water quality protection permit aspect, that's important because we do not regulate air, odor, animal welfare, noise, traffic, anything like that. This also isn't a siting program.
Mr. Jackson, I would say that as a highlight, every farmer knows what NR 243 is. That, they have to know the water. They have to know the water runoff and the danger stuff. So everything's under NR 243.
So if they're under careful status, yes, they definitely have to understand 243. And the permits that we issue have a lot, I would say, friendlier language to the average person to understand what that criteria is and what they're supposed to do. If you're not careful, then you generally fall under some of the 590 standards and NR 151.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So in Wisconsin, I've heard that, I don't know if it's true or not, that's what I'm asking, that there's a percentage of the permits that are expired. So how long does the permit last?
Sure.
Good question.
And then what do you do when one expires? What happens?
So a permit, once issued, is good for 5 years. And how it works is at year 4, I remind them that their permit's going to be expiring. They have to submit a reissuance application. As long as I receive that reissuance application before the permit expires, they're covered under that existing permit, even though it does expire, even after it does expire. And then I work toward doing site visits and reevaluating their site, and then I reissue their permit.
And how many people in the state of Wisconsin do that? I mean, you're saying.
I'm saying we for my area.
Yeah.
Across the state, I believe we have 14 or 15 people.
And that's adequate to be able to do what you need to do? Or do we have expired permits all over the state?
So right now, our permit backlog is roughly 24-25%. Where we're supposed to be in conjunction with EPA, their goal is 15. The last year, we lost 2 engineers and 5 CAFO staff that work the regions. And 4 out of those 5 positions were filled, so now we're kind of playing catch up again. And it kind of, the permit cycles aren't necessarily lined up to have equal numbers expiring every year. So like for me right now, I have 3 expired permits that I'm working on. But in the next 9 months, I have another 9 expiring. So it's going to be a pretty challenging year for me this fall, winter, and into the spring. But definitely we're working on all those. So
I guess, Sharon, your question would be, is there any farmers operating under an expired permit?
Well, there is.
yes. Yep. So let me think in Polk County.
We have 4 CAFOs in what? 5 CAFOs in Polk County,
5.
4 dairy and 1 poultry.
Correct. And one of those is expired as of now.
But the expiration of a permit doesn't preclude them from being, under coverage class. Yeah. They just need that permit needs to be reviewed and updated. Yeah.
Yep.
Because the permit lacks coverage of it. Yeah. Not like the car insurance.
All right, next slide for me.
Thanks for the question.
All right, one more slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about discharge limitations. So if you're a new source swine, veal, or poultry operation, basically if you did not exist before 2007, you'd be considered a new source. There may be no discharge in manure process, wastewater release, and navigable waters from the production area. And so I look at this as a bowl. And if you're if you're under a permit and you're new source swine, veal, or poultry, you can not only have anything leave that bowl. So even if it could rain 10 inches, nothing should leave that bowl. And for those types of operations, that's generally pretty easy because as I showed you the picture previous of that hog CAFO in Buffalo County, the manure storage is under the barn, and so it doesn't take precipitation. For any other CAFO, so that would more, generally we're talking dairy and beef operations, where they need no discharge of manure, process wastewater, pollutants, and navigable waters from the reduction area except under limited precipitation situations. So in the engineering side of things, when you have open lagoons, we have feed storage, runoff collection, tanks and things like that, everything is designed to be able to store a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. And so if there was, let's say we had, well, I used the rainstorm we had in Baldwin this year. So we had 8-9 inches of rain. And so legally, a pit could overtop and discharge navigable waters, and that would be legal in theory, but the kicker is going to be that discharge still has to meet surface water quality standards. And I've had manure pits overtop before, and I've never ever had that discharge meet surface water quality standards. So I really can't even imagine a situation that would actually be legal. Next slide.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
Sorry. So I'm one of the new supervisors, so I've been reading a lot about this. So I read about the dairy down in Baldwin, that Emerald Sky one,
Mm-hmm.
and that it had 5 known manure violations in 3 years. So what happens when they continually have violations? What's the process then?
So we have what's considered a step enforcement process depending on the violation. And we do still have an open enforcement case with that farm. So we're still working through the process. Nothing has been finalized. I will say that they did have a large spill in 2016, and it was discovered in 17.
Yeah.
And
275,000 gallons.
correct. And that case went to the Department of Justice, and they settled out of court. So that portion has been taken care of. That occurred in the fall of 19. That's the open enforcement case yet.
By being settled out of court with that cash fine.
Yes,
$80,000 fine.
Correct.
Plus the corrective measures.
that's true. That's true. Because there's
Stipulation that it can have the corrective measures, what's required of the farm in order to bring up that. You're welcome.
so a few things that these farms are expected to do is have an emergency response plan for one, and that the permittee shall develop an emergency response plan within 30 days of the permit being issued or reissued, and is designed to address spills or discharges. And so when I go and do an inspection, I'm going to ask for this document, and I want to make sure that that document is available to their staff if the farm manager isn't there, in case a hose breaks or something happens, so that their employees know what to do. Basically, it comes down to, who's your contact for county, to gather county to know what's going on. My name will be on there. We're going to look to make sure that they have contact information for operations that can clean up the spill. That could be septic haulers that have a vac truck. That could be excavators if they need to create dams in ditch lines to prevent the manure from moving. Basically, I want these farms to be prepared in case something does happen. Another section is mortality management. The permittee will need to maintain records on their mortality management and how they're disposing of those animals.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because I have a question on that one. Because I've been reading about how the African swine flu went through all the herds in China and Poland, and how they have destroyed millions, literally millions of hogs. So we have a hog farm here. Say we have a hog farm here and it's got 26,000 hogs in it, and something like that happens. What happens?
So my counterpart Zoe, she kind of she specializes in that type of stuff.
Oh,
Yeah,
So-
I'm an animal mortality.
yeah.
So she's going to be talking after mine. So if we can take care of that, yes, absolutely. The other thing that I say is going to be nothing compared to what she's going to be able to offer you. But what I will say is that the disposal cannot violate surface or groundwater rules, so you cannot contaminate those sources. And generally, what I see, I think I have a slide that a couple of different ways that I've seen, good and bad, of mortality management. Next slide for me. Okay, so here's kind of a good example and a bad example. So the bad example is this one here, and this one was a farm that was going out of business, and they weren't really doing what they're supposed to toward the end, and I set up an inspection to go out and take a look at their site. So what they were doing here was they were composting it was on just bare ground, and there wasn't really any runoff controls or anything around it to prevent runoff from leaving that pile. And that's definitely something that we do not want to see, and that was fixed within the week. What we like to see, a good option that I've seen at farms, is on the right here, and so this is a farm that I work with in St. Croix, and they have a concrete pad, and they actually do compost, mortality composting on it, as well as storing their solid manure piles. And with this, any runoff that comes off of it actually goes to a drain, and then gets transferred to the manure lagoon. So there's no discharge of any kind from this. All right, next slide. All right, one more. All right, so looking into some nutrient management, this is a big component of the CAFO permit. So I want to just talk about a few terms first. So a lot of our rules reference NRCS 590 standard, and that's NRCS came up with the main nutrient management standard that a lot of people use. We're going to talk about surface water quality management areas, and that is areas within 1,000 feet of a lake, 300 feet of a stream or river, or 300 feet from a conduit to a stream or river. We're going to talk about processed wastewater. So processed wastewater is wastewater produced at a livestock operation. That could be milking powder, wash water, it could be egg wash, it could be feed and leachate, that type of stuff. And then finally, high-risk runoff period. That's times between February 1st through March 31st. All right, next slide. So, as part of the nutrient management plan, permittees shall complete a nutrient management plan as part of their application, whether that's a first-time application or a reissuance application. And within that nutrient management plan, also known as NMP, the farm shall, the idea of the plan is to budget the nutrients and the waste that's produced at the farm and applying that onto fields in accordance with UW soil test recommendations. They have to meet the NRCS 590 standards, And we also have to meet our Wisconsin code and our 243, specifically section 14 that talks about nutrient management planning. And I would say that NO 243 is more restrictive than 590. And where it's more restrictive specifically is the application of liquid manure in the winter. 590 allows it in certain circumstances. In NO 243, it does not. All right, next slide. So one round applied, manure process wastewater may not leave the land application site. And there's a couple of things here, but one of the things I do, well, we do, I shouldn't say just me all the time, but we in the state do, is we do manure hauling audits. So we go out, we meet with farms, and we walk their fields while they're spreading manure or after they spread manure to make sure that they're meeting the criteria for that stream depending on the sensitive areas. And sometimes I set these up ahead of time, sometimes I just pop in. And like I happen to know, let's say a neighbor calls and tells me that they're hauling, I just come out, follow the truck, figure out which field they're on, I'll call the farm and just walk out. With permission, of course. So another thing is manure process wastewater may not be applied on areas of the field with depth to groundwater or bedrock less than 24 inches. And each field that a CAFO has is going to have a restriction map. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you an example of a restriction map. So that restriction map is going to show where those shallow soils are, or where that potential depth of groundwater is within 5 feet or within 2 feet for that matter. And one of the things that these farms need to do is before they apply manure process wastewater, they would actually have to go and dig a hole. Generally they dig it 30 inches and they measure down to see if the water table is within 24 inches of the surface. If it is, they cannot spread on there. They can spread on other areas of the field, but just not that area. Another thing is manure process wastewater may not be applied to concentrated flow channels, and that's generally seen as grassed waterways. They can spread near them, they just can't spread through them. And also, and here's one that when we do have runoff events from a field, it's generally because of this one right here. So manure process wastewater may not be applied when precipitation capable of producing runoff is forecasted within 24 hours of the application. This is a very difficult one because how do you determine if precipitation is capable of producing runoff? So a half-inch of rain in April is not the same as a half-inch of rain in August. So in this case, we always have to rely on the farmer's judgment to determine if they want to take that risk. I always tell them, you know, I mean, it's their decision, but if something does happen, we're going to have to work through some enforcement. And that could be various things, but in general, farms are usually pretty good about this. I have been on a few where we've had some pop-up showers, and it's just one of those things where they need to know what's going on in the forecast. That's the main thing.
The difference between April and the fall goes around in April.
I would say usually in April it's just the soils tend to be more saturated.
Correct.
So to add a half-inch of rain plus, let's say you're putting 12,000 gallons per acre, sometimes that's a lot for a soil to handle. Those same soils in August, where the soil almost acts like a sponge. Unless you're getting a real pop-up shower, that half-inch comes really quick.
Later on, you're around 30.
Right. Right. All right, next slide. So I'll talk about surface water quality management areas and those restrictions. So like I said before, surface water quality management area is 1,000 feet from a lake, 300 feet from a stream or a river, or 300 feet from a conduit to a stream or river. So within those areas, the KFA is required to put in their nutrient management plan their strategy of how they want to apply manure within those areas. And the most common strategies are they will not apply manure process wastewater within 25 feet of a navigable stream, conduit to navigable waters, or wetland. And inject or immediately incorporate in the rest of that area. So I think of it this way. So if you have your stream, the first 25 feet cannot receive any manure process wastewater, period. From the 25 foot out to 300 feet, they are allowed, but they have to immediately incorporate or inject that manure. And that's to prevent any sort of runoff, like to enter the stream. So that being said, another option is to not apply manure process wastewater within 100 feet of a navigable stream, a navigable water, or conduit to navigable water. And this one's important because, well, some people put liquid manure on a hayfield. Well, you're not going to inject or incorporate on a hayfield, you're going to ruin it, potentially. So you're going to surface apply in those areas. So generally, what we see is if they're applying on hay ground, we're going to use the 100-foot setback. If they're going to be applying in the spring or the fall on, let's say, soybean or cornfields, where they can actually incorporate or inject, then we'll use this option here. And there's some other options, but generally they involve long-term no-till practices. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is an example of a field restriction map. And so here is, this line here is the conduit to navigable waters. And that needs to have, needs to have a 300-foot SWCMA, or a surface water quality management area. And so what we're doing here is, from here to here represents the 25-foot setback, that they will not spread any manure process wastewater. And then the purple from here out is where they would immediately incorporate or inject. So there's different programs that people can use. VW System came up with a great program called Snap Plus. That's generally what most farmers use. Their maps look a little bit different than this, but either way, every farm for every field has to have a map for it and showing all the sensitive areas and restricted areas. All right, next slide. So now let's talk about winter applications of solid manure. And so if the ground is frozen, you're going to have a little bit more restrictive criteria. And this is outlined in Table 4. So Table 4, I have on the next slide, but we're going to hold off on that for a second. So if the ground is snow covered, if there's less than 1 inch of snow, you cannot surface apply or immediately incorporate solid manure on these fields. If the snow is 1 to 4 inches, you can surface apply, but you're going to have additional restrictions, basically setbacks to those sensitive areas. I believe it's 200 feet from a stream or a wetland. We're going to have, if we're talking over 4 inches of snow, surface application is allowed, again with additional restrictions, but now you can no longer inject or incorporate. And we also have February 1st to March 31st is considered the high risk runoff period. And so surface application are prohibited if there's more than 1 inch of snow, or if the ground is frozen. Next slide. Okay, so this is table 4 that I was referring to in that previous slide. And the main thing is, when we're looking at a field, we're really looking at the field slope. And so the flatter it is, the less restrictive it is when you surface apply. And so we have setbacks to channelized flow in wetland areas. If the field has a slope of 0 to 6%, you're going to have a setback of 200 feet. Now compare that to if the slope is greater than 6, all the way up to 9%, now we're going to double that and we're going to go to 400 feet. So it's pretty restrictive. Okay, let's go to and I will also say if the field slope is over 9, you just can't apply period. All right, next slide. Okay, this will be the liquid manure applications. So if the ground is frozen, you cannot apply period. If there's snow on the ground but the ground isn't frozen, it's a little bit different. So if you have less than 1 inch of snow, you can surface apply, inject, or immediately incorporate. If you're looking at 1 to 4 inches of snow, you can inject or immediately incorporate, but now you can't surface apply. And if there's over 4 inches of snow, you can only inject. So a lot of times, when farmers want to go out and do this, first of all, they generally don't want to spread on snow, because one, they're going to expect a lot of phone calls from the neighbors wanting to know what's going on. But they're going to have to go and do some investigation to determine how much snow is actually out there. And again, from February 1st to March 31st, surface applications are going to be prohibited. Now, the tough part is, sometimes we have an early spring. And let's say we're dealing with March 15th, and there's no snow on the ground, and the ground isn't frozen. Well, we don't consider those to, then at that time, that field is not considered to be in a winter condition, and you'd be able to apply manure as you normally would in the spring. So it's a little bit different. So it's really going to be dependent on that field condition. All right, next slide. The exception to spreading liquid manure in the winter on frozen or snow-covered ground is emergency winter applications. I've dealt with 4 or 5 of these in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's generally when you have really late springs, where the ground is still frozen, we have snow in the ground. Generally it happens in April, where normally guys are out already spreading, but they're not able to because of all the snow and everything else. We allow limited winter applications only when it's the possibility of a lagoon overtopping is an imminent threat. And so I work with these farms to see if they, one, can find alternative storage options. That's usually the most important thing. Can they take it somewhere else? And really at that point, we look at it as an emergency. So we don't, CAFO, non-CAFO, if they have a pit, if they have room, let's transfer some over. If that's not an option, then we allow on a case-by-case basis for them to spread liquid manure on the frozen ground or snow. And I will say these fields have to be pre-approved for this. They are the flattest fields that they have. There's pretty good restrictions and setbacks to navigable waters, conduits, which is important. But we also have to realize that the rates that they're allowed to spread are a lot lower. So if we're dealing with the field that is 0 to 6% slope, you can go up to 7,000 gallons per acre. Now, if it's over 6, that drops to 3,500. So the examples I have here, so this was a winter application that happened in Polk County. I believe it was spring of 19. Pretty sure it was spring of 19. Really flat field. Percent slope was less than 6, but the farmer could go up to 7,000 gallons per acre. I believe in this case they dropped it to 3, just because they wanted to reduce their risk. This one here is in Buffalo County, and similar situation. Here, the application rate was, I believe it was 5,500 gallons per acre that they were spreading on that field. So these are kind of what these things look like. Again, this is kind of an exception to the rule. This is not a practice that we even like to, we definitely don't promote it. We try to do everything we can to prevent this from occurring. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's talk about inspections, record keeping, and reporting. All right, next slide. So the CAFO permit, or this program we're talking about here, as self-inspections are a big key portion to this. And so what you need to understand is there's the federal version of this permit, and then there's the state. So EPA can, well, let me say it this way. We, Wisconsin, have decided that we want to implement these rules ourselves, and EPA gave us that power to do that. And then within that, we also wrote our own additional rules listed in NR 243. So, and that's important to know because you may have heard in the news that EPA is being a little more lax with the COVID-19 for facilities and discharges. That may have been happening on a country or a nation level, but in Wisconsin, we have our own additional rules, and we have not been lax on that at all. So the only thing I can think of that has changed due to COVID-19 is some farms are in a situation where the creameries were no longer taking milk, or they were reducing how much milk they would take. So all of a sudden, now these farms had to get rid of this milk somehow, and they're land applying some of it. And generally, we have a process to allow that to occur that usually has a 14-day public comment period to add land to do that. What we did was we shortened that 14-day comment period, I believe, to as little as 1 day, but I can't think of anybody that actually took advantage of that and did that. Most of these farms ended up putting it either in the lagoons or they already had fields approved to land apply. So I guess we haven't really been affected too much in Wisconsin on that, which has been a good thing, I think.
I think most of the creameries, they had their figure drop about 10%.
Yeah, that's what we've been kind of hearing. And even when, like for example, when Burnett had to shut down here because of the fire, they were able to spread that around. So that's been a great thing.
Yeah, even some creameries in Minnesota.
Nice. Excellent. The careful permit that we issue here in Wisconsin, and actually even the federal version, there's a lot of self-monitoring and self-reporting. Mainly because we have 14, 15 of us in the state, we cannot possibly be everywhere. So we rely on some of these self-reporting techniques. So the permittee has to sample their manure, and they have to do soil tests to monitor nutrient levels in that soil and nutrient levels in the manure as it goes out. And that's how they determine rates. The permittee also has some self-inspections that they need to do. to comply with their permits, and that includes daily visual inspections of water lines. That includes weekly inspections of waste storage structures and the level of material in those structures. So every week, I'm expecting these guys to go out and measure the volumes in their lagoons. And then we also have quarterly inspections of outdoor areas. So that could be animal lots, feed storage areas. Basically what we're doing is we want them to look to see, do you have concrete that needs to be repaired? Are you having runoff issues that's leaving that? And if you do, how are you planning to fix it? And if they do, in fact, have to do an emergency winter spreading, I have down listed here visual inspections of winter applications. So it's not a, oh, we're approved to spread, we'll go out and spread, and that's it. I'm expecting them to go out and take a look at this stuff once we actually have a spring thaw, just to make sure nothing's running off. All right, next slide. So this is a CAFO calendar that we provide all the CAFOs in the state. Whether they want to use it or not, it's completely up to them. This is voluntary, but either way, if they don't use this, they still need to provide us with all this information. And what it does is it lists, it's a calendar for the entire year, and each day lists what they should be looking at. So every day it's going to have water lines listed. Did they check them? If they did, check that box. And then weekly, we're gonna have listed measuring their lagoons, different things like that. All the things that they're required to do. And on this side, it kind of lists who did the inspection, were there issues found, how do you remedy that? And these are things that I look at before I go do the inspection with the farm. Generally, I go out and do inspections usually twice in a 5-year period. And so what I do is I look to see, did they have any issues? And I'll go and look for those issues to see if they're rectified.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
So if they choose not to use this, then how do you get that information? Do they do reports or?
So they can provide you with some sort of narrative, they can provide you with some sort of Excel spreadsheet that still lists that same information. Either way, they still need to provide you with that information.
Just remember, folks, that everybody that's farming and how things have changed, and the farmers I talk to, they are just loaded with paperwork and these things every day. That you're farming, it's a complicated situation. They're up to their necks in this type of thing.
So the key way I use this is, well, I guess the idea is, if you're self-monitoring, I should be able to come, I'm gonna look the exact same stuff that you were supposed to be looking at. I shouldn't find any issues. Because I'm concerned, all my inspections should be incredibly boring, because I shouldn't find any issues. But if we do, we have conversations, we try to look, I talk them through, okay, what are you looking for when you go to these sites, things like that, and kind of critique what they're looking for. All right, next slide. So another part of monitoring and reporting is the permittee is required to report certain types of non-compliance within 24 hours. Generally, what we see here is, let's say your manure lagoons are getting too high. You have too much in that structure, and it's above the maximum operating level. You need to let me know so that we can try to work things out. Whether it's, do we have to allow you to spread some in the winter? How do we get that down? Can I help you try to find off-site storage? Things like that. The other thing is if there is some sort of manure spill. Yes.
I just have a question. What do you find that they're pretty good about the self-monitoring and the self-reporting? Is that something you kind of need to get after them about? Or is it something they're maybe not quite real, sure about at first or real confident doing? You kind of have to show them the way of what you're looking for.
I would
How
say
does that go?
it's a combination both really. When they're new, they really don't know what we're expecting. So one of the things I try to do when I'm doing these inspections, it's important to set expectations, because I can give them this careful calendar, I can give them a permit, but there's still a disconnect. So I try to walk them through exactly what I expect of them. I can usually tell based on their careful calendar if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if it doesn't look right, we'll have those conversations. So like I said, another one is municipals. In general, when a spill does occur, I tell them, okay, first stop the source, contain it, then call me. Don't call me before you do all that stuff. And guys are really good at this, because we don't want to get in trouble. You know, it's usually these things happen. It's pretty visual. It could be a hose break along a road ditch or something like that. And so, in general, what I see is these guys want to comply with their permit. They want to be good neighbors. They communicate pretty well with the agency. And when a spill does occur, we go out and we take a look and we help however we can. And sometimes it's trying to give them ideas on how to prevent or how to contain, or again, setting expectations on how to clean up the site. All right, next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the engineering design and submittal approvals. So we in this program look at what's considered reviewable structures or systems. And some examples of those are runoff control structures, feed storage areas, permanent spray irrigation or other land application systems. So that could be some farms, they collect their leachate from their feed pad and they run it through center pivots. Or they have a traveling gun irrigation that they use to spray that material. All those materials, or all those structures would be considered a reviewable structure. Manure lagoons, manure treatment or transfer systems. So basically that could be pipes or pumps that transfer manure from a feed store, a freestyle barn to the lagoon. We look at that type of stuff, or any structures or systems associated with storage, containment, treatment, handling of manure process wastewater. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, wait. Oh, that's me. Okay. Is it clapping? Okay. All right, so these are some examples of some of the reviewable structures that I've been associated with some of the farms I've worked with in the past. So on the left-hand side here, we have a feed storage area. So it's a big concrete slab. You're going to see a big pile of feed with a plastic cover over the top and a bunch of tires on it. So the idea is, if it rains, or if leachate is produced in that pile, it's going to run out. You can actually see it right here. And it runs and gets collected in this basin right there. So this is all considered a reviewable structure. So that structure has to meet engineering standards. It also has to be sized appropriately to allow that structure or that basin to store the leachate produced and up to a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. So once it's in this basin, the farm can either directly land apply that material, or they can ship it over to the long-term storage manure lagoon, whatever they want to do, and transfer it out and land apply it that way. The picture on the right is a concrete manure lagoon, and yeah, it's pretty much self-explanatory on that one. Next slide. Here's a couple other ones. Okay, so on the left, we have let's do it this way. Let's start with the right. So on the right, we have a concrete feedlot, and as you can see, we have the concrete sidewalls. So So that system, if it rains, it's going to rain, and any runoff it's produced, it's going to flow left to right, and it gets stored in an underground tank. And all those systems, the pumps, the underground structure, that's all needs to meet certain standards. Picture on the left, different feedlots, again, concrete, has the concrete sidewalls. The idea here is it runs from the background to the foreground, and the runoff will run right through this green pipe, and there is a concrete tank underground, and we have the red pump here that allows that farm to pump that liquid out into the manure spreaders and run apply that way. So all these things are reviewed by our engineers. Next slide. So engineering plans and specifications for proposed reviewable structure or facilities must be submitted to the DNR for approval prior to construction. So that's pretty important. We need to make sure these systems are designed properly, because the last thing you want to do is build something that doesn't, and then all of a sudden we look at it and we can't approve the system, and you have to rip it out. And that's pretty impossible. So it's very important that these structures are not built prior to approval. So once a farm's engineer designs or has these plans and they submit it to us, our engineering reviewers have 90 days to review that approval, or actually that submittal. All right, next slide. So talk a little bit about evaluations. So the department may require an engineering evaluation of an existing reviewable structure. So let's say we have a farm that has 800 animal units and wants to expand to over 1,000. Well, obviously they have existing structures there. So what I'll do is I'll look to see what they have, what's considered a reviewable structure, and I'll ask for an engineering evaluation of every one of those structures as part of their permit application. And what we need to do is we need our engineers review those structures and determine if they meet standards. And if they don't, we go back to the farm and they have to provide some sort of proposed upgrades to meet standards. We also have the ability to ask for an evaluation of a system from an existing CAFO if it doesn't seem to be working properly. Let's say there's a lot of cracked concrete, it's got some maintenance issues, so we can ask for evaluations on that as well. Next slide. All right, one more. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the permitting process itself. So I break this down between a first-time issuance and a reissuance. So I guess it seems fitting, I'll use Cumberland LLC in Burnett as the example. So they submitted a preliminary application, and that typically is submitted a year before that operation intends to reach 1,000 animal units. And the preliminary application provides some pretty basic information: who the operator is going to be, the location, how many animals they're going to have, and it really sets it up as a placeholder for the department to start talking to them and reviewing their site, and just kind of talking about what they're ultimately going to need to provide us when they submit their final application, which is generally submitted 6 months prior to them reaching that 1,000 animal units. Exactly. So Cumberland is stuck here. They haven't done anything beyond the preliminary application. And just kind of update on that, I have not heard anything from them for months. I'd say at least 6 months to 6 to 8 months that I haven't heard anything. So
Maybe they'll stay down.
Hard to say. If it's a reissuance application, about year 4 of the permit, I'm gonna send them a letter reminding them that their permit's gonna expire in a year. And that's where I'm gonna go and I'm gonna schedule a site visit. And we'll talk about what documentation will be needed for the reissuance application. And that reissuance application has to be submitted to us prior to that permit being expired.
Has their permit, their initial permit, has that expired yet?
So Cumberland has not been issued anything. No permits have been issued to them, period.
Thank you.
Yep. Next slide. Okay.
All right, for issuance and reissuance applications, we're going to have your application forms. Again, that's going to really include the address, who the operator is going to be, who their crop consultant is, who their engineering consultant is going to be. We're going to ask for an animal unit calculation form. I want to know their current animal numbers and any sort of proposed expansions in that next 5-year term. I'm going to ask for labeled aerial maps of the production area. I'm going to potentially ask for an environmental analysis questionnaire, depending on the situation. If they're a new farm that has not been issued a previous permit, I will definitely ask for that. Or if they're going to be having a large expansion. And that questionnaire covers a lot of different things. All sorts of questions. It goes from potential environmental concerns to how many staff you're going to be hiring, the financial benefits, economic benefits to the area, all sorts of different things. We're also gonna ask for a 5-year nutrient management plan, and that's again a really important piece because they're gonna need to determine how much manure they propose to generate for 5 years and where they plan to land apply that manure on what fields, and it has to be budgeted appropriately so that you're providing that plant, that crop, with the nutrients that they need and no more.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question when we have a moment?
Yes, Amy, I think you can address Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Jackson, for coming. I have a question on that topic so if we have a permit that's issued and we have a manure management plan tied to this operation, how do we connect, does this also include like leased properties or other farm fields that aren't under the ownership of this farm that would be receiving manure, and are those fields also monitored under their permit for manure management?
Yes.
Yes,
so
they are.
The 5-year NMP can include leased land, owned land, wherever they have verbal or written agreement to place that manure on those fields. That all has to be budgeted. And obviously, a farm can lose land, they can add land, but at all times they have to show that they have adequate land base to land apply the manure that they're producing every year. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay. Another piece is going to be the 180-day liquid manure storage calculations. So every CAFO that produces liquid waste has to have 180 days or 6 months of storage available to them. And these are shown in their calculations. So I want to know how much waste is being produced. I want to know how much runoff they're collecting from their feed storage area, from feedlots. All that needs to be calculated. and they need to show proof that they have, or how many days, I should say, that they have of waste storage available to them. Again, minimum of 6 months, and if they don't, then we have to work that out, because they need to come up with, whether it's using off-site storage or whatever they need to do, they need to be able to show that they have enough storage. We're also going to include any engineering evaluations for reviewable structures. Again, that's going to be determined during my site visit. And they're also going to need to include any engineering plans and specifications if they have any, or they're proposing any new reviewable structures or facilities. Next slide. So as far as, again, the permit process here, these documents need to be submitted electronically to our website, and that means that all the documentation that they submit, annual reports, nutrient management plan, all that stuff is available to the public for review. Once we get a reissuance application or a first-time application, we kind of break it off into different teams. So our engineer reviewers, they're going to look at the 180-day storage calculations. They'll look at the engineering evaluations, again, if present, and the engineering plans and specifications as well. Then we have a separate group of people that work statewide that are going to be reviewing the 5-year nutrient management plans. And then me as the regional person, my responsibilities are doing site inspections, enforcing the permit. I'm the one that drafts the permit. I would be the one that potentially would have a public hearing, that type of stuff. All right, next slide. So as the regional person, again, I need to track all these things to make sure that the engineers do their portion, the nutrient management plan people review and do what they're supposed to do. And once I determine that's taken care of, that's when I go ahead and I'll draft that permit. Next slide. And so this is kind of the process. So we have the plan and spec review, we have the nutrient management plan review. Once I get all that stuff, I'm going to draft a permit, and I take that permit and I create a public notice that we have a proposed permit for that operation. That notice gets posted 2 places, one on the DNR website and again in the local paper for that specific area. Now what that does is that starts a 30-day public comment period. And so for 30 days, we'll take comments on really anything regarding that permit. If people are in favor of it, if they're against it, if they don't feel like the permit goes far enough, things like that. During that period of time, people can also request a public hearing. And so with this, generally, if it's a controversial farm, I'll plan on having a public hearing from the get-go, because it's probably going to be required. If not, the public has the ability to request a public hearing. And for that to occur, the trigger for me is if 5 or more people ask for it, I'm going to have one. And so then what happens then is if we determine we need to have a public hearing, then I'm going to go and draft another public notice. And again, that gets posted on our website and the local paper so people know what's going on. And then I'll list the location, times, and all that stuff when that's going to occur. That being said, whether it's from written comments, whether it's verbal comments from the public hearing, I take those comments and I respond to them. That could mean maybe the permit, maybe we didn't receive comments that ground us changing the permit. Perhaps we end up not even issuing the permit based on the comments that we find. Or sometimes comments have us modify the existing permit to include something that we did include the first time. So there's different things. So definitely a public comment period is pretty important. All that being said, if that's all rectified, then we're able to issue that permit. And this generally, it's a pretty long process, to be honest. It's from a permit expiring, we're getting the reissuance application, we're working through all that stuff. If we have a public hearing or anything like that, I mean, it could be 8 months to a year before that permit's actually issued, because it's a long process. All right, next slide. So as far as compliance monitoring that field staff are going to be doing, we review the permittees' annual reports. Again, that's the CAFO calendar that I was talking about earlier. That summarizes their self-monitoring activities. And that report, that annual report, is going to be submitted to us by January 31st of every year. And that, again, that really talks about things that happened on the farm production site itself. We also have nutrient management plan updates. Now that submittal is sent to us by March 31st of every year. That focuses more on the land application side of things. How much manure was generated? Where did it go? Soil tests, manure application, or I should say manure analysis to determine how much nutrients is in that, or any sort of inspections that they need to do. So like verifying distance to bedrock, those types of things. All that's going to be within the nutrient management plan update. We also respond to citizen complaints. On occasion, we'll get complaints and we'll go out and we'll determine what's going on. That could lead to a site inspection, whether it's at the production area itself or on a field site. Like I said before, we do manure hauling audits on operations land application to basically look at their land application practices. And historically, what we've done is we have inspections at least once, well, I should say, have inspections of the production area or the farm site itself once in a 5-year permit term, typically happening in the last year, year 4 of that permit term. Since we are darn near full staffed, we've been told to now up that to 2 times during a 5-year permit term. So generally, the idea is year 2 and year 4 is when we go out and look. And obviously, more frequent inspections can be warranted if we do have compliance issues. There are farms that I've visited more than that. That's just if they show a history of having some issues, I'll pop in a little bit more often. We also do spill response, and all these things. If the DNR is able to document some sort of noncompliance, we do use our stepped enforcement to rectify some of those issues. All right, next slide. So this is kind of generally the coverage area. Let me jump over here. So this is my area here. I run the red on the edge here. I work with, I believe it's 25 permitted facilities right now. The goal for the program is to average between 20 to 25 permits per person. All right, next slide. And again, we have more information on our website. We have changed the CAFO portion of our website in the last week. I'm still trying to navigate it and trying to figure out where everything is, but a lot more information is available on there as well, and also including some of the breakdowns on what needs to be submitted for applications and resubmittals. That's basically what I had for you guys today. Any further questions on what I presented? I kind of threw a lot of information at you.
Did we get a copy of this presentation in our packets? I didn't see it, but can we get access to this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Because it's a lot of information.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Amy.
Thank you. Jeff, I have a quick question on the hog mortality piece. So, you know, a scenario now with COVID, we think about African swine flu, et cetera, et cetera. So if we have, say, 26,000 hogs, kind of a two-part question. Who oversees that disposal piece, and how do we guarantee surface and groundwater protections on that? And then secondarily, how do we, does the WPDS permit process at all cover this, or are we in another whole realm of permitting and that stuff?
Okay, so I have a coworker with me today, Zoe.
Okay.
She's going to cover that information. So she's actually up next.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Nope. So, yep.
Well, I have to say, this has to be a first. I don't think anybody's ever let me talk about mortalities before lunch. So I will try and keep it as less stomach turning. If anybody has got, do I need to hold it? Okay. Go to the USB drive. Yep. And then grab one of my paper. Yep. And I'm gonna want to PDF that before you release it. Yeah, you can right now, but you can just play right now, and then we'll PDF it before. Okay. Okay. My name is Zoe McManama. I'm the CAPO hydrogeologist for the state. There is only one of me. I look after whatever people need me to look after, and that generally tends to be the dramatic thing that's going on right now. So in 2015, the dramatic thing was avian influenza, which was mass mortality event in Barron County, Chippewa County, Jefferson County. So that was our first real foray into a mass mortality event for animals and for farms and for CAFOs and how we were going to deal with them. With a foreign animal disease such as African swine fever, the primary jurisdiction is going to be USDA APHIS in conjunction with DATCAP, Department of Agriculture. So they follow the Red Book procedures, which you can find online under USDA Red Book, and then you just write in African swine fever. And that goes through a lot of the, all of the steps that will be taken as far as containment, sampling, permitting, whatever needs to go on with that. The problem with African swine fever is that it's very virulent and it's very persistent in the environment. So it has particular environmental conditions that need to be attained in order to contain it. And usually with animal mortalities, composting is our #1 choice in Wisconsin. People say, well, why do you pick composting? It's like because we have generally high groundwater, we have generally permeable soils, and we have a lot of carbon. So we are very blessed. Some of the western states have no carbon that they can afford to put their animals in. So we tend to lean more towards composting. The other thing that comes in is we tend to have in our agricultural areas droughty soils. So when the compost is finished, we end up with a product that we can then use as a soil amendment, which helps with our moisture retention in our soils. So it's a benefit down the track. We have a lot of experience with composting swine after COVID. As you're probably aware, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, they all had farms go down because they exceeded their market time for their pigs and they had to get rid of stock. So they decided to do some depop. the mechanism that they used was not the same as what we would use for African swine fever for the reasons that I've previously mentioned. We can't macerate a pig with ASF because it aerosolizes the virus and risks transmission. So we have to be very careful about how we handle the animals themselves. The other thing is we're probably not going to be able to transport them off farm. They'll have to be on farm disposal, or at least as close as possible. So the composting techniques that we use are very highly regulated, and there will be a designated team given to that farm, whichever farm goes down, to monitor the compost to make sure that the piles are reaching the temperatures that they need to, that there aren't any leachate issues, that we're not getting scavenging, and that we're not having any other unforeseen problems. So everything from the build of the pile, the materials that go into it, the temperature of the piles is monitored, recorded, analyzed, everything, because everything feeds back to APHIS, which holds the pocketbook. And the pocketbook includes the indemnity for the farm. So they get some money back for the stock that they lose, and also for the materials that we use. Does that cover that question with ASF? Okay. So now to the boring stuff. I'll try not to do, I'll try and rip through this, just because we've been looking at PowerPoint for a while now. So, groundwater monitoring for CAFOs. I got asked a lot of questions about this because people get super excited about a new CAFO going in, and is it going to poison my well? They're the words that I hear more often than anything else. Is this CAFO going to poison my well? Next slide. So we'll go through the authorities that we have for groundwater monitoring, what groundwater monitoring can do and what it can't do, the environmental risk and its role in groundwater monitoring, and then how we assess it, the requirements and the challenges that we have. So just like everything else in CAFO, most of the authority comes under NR 243-15, parent 7. And that's the specific language that allows us to require groundwater monitoring. If exceedances are found on the farm post groundwater monitoring, or if exceedances are found in a well off-site, it also comes under NR 140. There's that authority there. Next slide. So what is groundwater monitoring? Next slide. Okay, this is the fancy way. It's a 4-dimensional diagnostic tool to collect data. And by 4 dimensions, I mean it's spatial and it's temporal as well. So we're looking at what it does over time. The data collected is in a fixed spot. One well, one place, one area of the groundwater table. The data collected is at a single point in time. The time that you take that data, that's what you're getting. And the purpose of the collection of it is for more analysis. Next slide. So in this picture, the monitoring the groundwater over time produces individual snapshots of information which are compiled to form a bigger image. So kind of like a pixelated thing with a TV. You get you form an image about what's happening underground, how the groundwater is behaving, etc. Next slide. So we talked about this a little bit. Next slide. All right, this is a perfect example. So if you think of groundwater monitoring as this, if you take your samples less frequently, you just get a portion of the picture. You don't get the whole picture. The more frequently you take the samples and the closer the spatial area is, the clearer the picture will be. Now, the problem with that is that groundwater monitoring and wells are extremely expensive. So there's a balance to be made between what is adequate to collect, to produce the data that you need, and not go overboard with the cost. Next slide. So this is extremely important to remember. Groundwater monitoring alone does not prevent contamination from occurring. Okay. People want groundwater monitoring on wells and farms. That's one thing that, they think that it's a protective measure. But it doesn't prevent the contamination, and it doesn't remove contaminants that are present either. All it does is give you data. That is all groundwater monitoring does. Okay. So this is where environmental risk comes in. And of course, environmental risk is the likelihood that a substance, action, or reaction will negatively impact the quality, quantity, or function of natural resources. Next slide. This is the image that I would like you all to remember, because this is the one image that groundwater monitoring is all about. Okay? If you are missing any one of these things, the risk is dramatically reduced. Okay? So we've got generation and source, so what it is, how it's being made. Characterization, the elements of that particular substance. Activation, which is transport, basically. And then receptors, like who's getting it. Next slide. So for types of contaminants associated with a CAFO, you might see carcasses. Generally, you don't, because their routine mortalities are either taken off-site or they have composting operations. Manure, you're definitely going to see that. Leachate, wastewaters, agricultural chemicals, and then to a lesser extent, fuels, hydraulic fluids, and lubricants. Next slide. So then we look at, is it a primary, a secondary, or a tertiary contaminant? You can go on site, you can inspect things, you can see one thing, but if you don't put the two and two together, that, oh wait, if that mixes with that, then we've got a problem. So you have to think kind of outside the box about what's being generated. The biggest one with that is where water is contacting a solid to form a leachate or a liquid that's going to be problematic. And that's where groundwater gets impacted, is when that is created. Next slide. So then we look at characterization. We look at chemical constituents. We look at the physical and chemical properties, the environmental chemical behavior, and environmental persistence. So as far as the nitrogen goes, is it nitrate? Is it nitrite? Is it organic nitrogen? Is it ammonia? They're all nitrogen compounds, but they will behave very differently in the environment, and they all create different problems or solutions or benefits. Some are more soluble than others. Some of them move along. Others are hooked up a lot faster. Next slide. We also look at the usual pH, EH, which is redox, or what state nitrogen is likely to be in. Total suspended solids and total dissolved solids. What's floating around, what's dissolved. Relative density, so some things float, some things sink. And concentrations, which is very important for exceedances. We also have reactivity, stability, and mobility. So how's it going to react in a particular situation? Is it likely to be located in one spot and stay there? Or is it going to shoot out of town on the next bus? Nitrate, or nitrogen, is complex. There's a lot of things going on with it, and it can exist in multiple forms in multiple places at once. So if we're really, people say, oh, we're worried about nitrates. No, we're worried about nitrogen, because nitrogen can create nitrates due to any process. If we don't understand all the processes, then we really don't have a good picture about what we're dealing with. Next slide. Contaminant pathways. So Polk County soils are sandy, some clay, some are clay, some are sandy, some are shallow bedrock, some is deep bedrock. You got all kinds of things going on. So depending on what kind of groundwater pathways you have, or what kind of soils you have, you're going to have different infiltration rates, different ways that the water is going to want to move subsurface, and also we've got a whole lot of anthropogenic issues with roadways, preferential pathways down utility lines, all of that we take into account as well. Next slide. So catalyst for activation, we talk about accidental spills, intentional discharges, precipitation events are a big one. Freeze thaw. Freeze thaw is an interesting one because people don't usually think about it, but the application of manure on a southern facing field is going to be slightly more problematic than a north facing field at some points during the year. So that's one thing that we have conversations about, or Jeff has conversations with. Over application is a big one. Sorry, that was me gesturing. Over application, talking about nitrogen balances. Irrigation. I get a lot of questions about irrigation. Well, what's the deal with irrigation and nitrates in groundwater? So irrigation's a tricky one. It changes groundwater flow directions. It changes the cycle of what nitrate is doing. The other thing that it is doing is it takes nitrate out of groundwater and puts it back at the surface, giving it a second chance to be utilized by a crop that's there. And there's some awesome research out there about the efficacy of that. And the problem is, like, sometimes we're adding nitrogen as we're doing it, so we're kind of going over. So that's one thing that we're looking at on a different side. Leaks, decomposition, and then contact. This is just infiltration stuff. Next. Okay, receptors, surface waters, trout streams, lots of those in Polk County. Waterways, wetlands, groundwater, wells. Groundwater and wells, they're our biggest concerns with nitrates with people. Okay. Air, nitrogen does volatilize in two different forms. In situ in the soil and other animals. That's more for carcasses than anything else. The other animals portion, scavengers. So what am I looking at when I'm looking at groundwater assessment? So I'm looking at depth of groundwater. And well construction data is not always useful because just like when you sit on the edge of a waterbed and you bump your partner up off of the bed, groundwater can have different flow patterns underneath and different pressures. So sometimes we end up with perched aquifers. Very common in that early part of spring when you got the thaw at the top and you got a frost line underneath and the water's hanging up at the top. We see that a lot. And also in areas where you've had deposition of the finer grained soils and things have popped up above the clay, but it's dry as a bone underneath. We look at recharge and discharge areas, springs, rivers, anything that's coming out, going in. Flow rates, how quickly the water is moving subsurface. And this is highly variable in Wisconsin. And it can have some seasonal variability to it as well. Nearby receptors, barns, wells, high cap surface waters, leachate. Next. So when do we require groundwater monitoring? When we need to answer one or more of these questions. What is there right now? So that's our background. Sometimes that's we monitor the neighbor's well to see what they already have, or get them to monitor their well, because anybody who has a private well in the state of Wisconsin should be monitoring their well annually for bacteria and nitrates, because that's what a good well owner does. But what is there right now? Get that background information. Then if there is issues where we need to start classifying things, we look at where is it coming from? What is it? So we're back to characterization. How's it moving? What's that transport pathway? And what's it impacting? So what are those receptors? Groundwater monitoring can be required at any time. Okay? If it's not in the original permit, it's not to say that it will never be required. It just may not be the right time for it. It may not be deemed necessary at that point. Okay? That doesn't mean that it's not going in at some point, if it needs to be. So, next. What makes agricultural monitoring different? Okay, There are multiple sources. Anybody's been near a farm, there's nitrogen sources all over the place, potential ones. There are multiple inputs that are likely, and they could be variable, they could be seasonal, they could be a whole lot of different things. We do have that seasonal variability with cropping, with manure spreading. Also the years of application. How long has this been going on? How long has that application been going on? Cropping adds a cumulative effect that is sometimes not characterized when you've got corn and bean cropping going on right next to a concentrated animal feeding operation. There's nitrogen inputs going on constantly here, but if we don't have a characterization of what's going on the farm, sometimes that can get a little cloudy as to what is coming from where. And that's where we go to our characterization, and we look at the different elements of the nitrate sources that are coming there, and we maybe have to split them apart sometimes. And then irrigation. Irrigation, withdrawal of groundwater, cone of depression, groundwater monitoring moves back and forth. People say, well, why don't you just put groundwater monitoring wells on the field that's being spread on? Well, that well may not be indicative or show us the regime of that particular field based on what's going on in that field. It's not that simple all the time. It's a complex system, and the whole picture needs to be taken into consideration before we can actually decide what is going to work for that place. And it is individual farm. There is no broad brushing this application. You have to take in each individual place with every little thing that goes on, because it all feeds into the bigger picture. So what next? Take a look at the engineering plans and specs, look at the geology, surface water, regional groundwater, look at the vulnerabilities. What information do we need? Will a groundwater monitoring network even give that to us? Can we get it somewhere else? Better, cheaper, whatever. If a groundwater monitoring network is deemed necessary, then we request a groundwater monitoring plan and go down that path. Next. So, if you have any questions, here's my name and number and where I sit when COVID doesn't have us there, but you can always call me. Feel free. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, can either one of you, although this whole thing is kind of question
Sure.
people, can either one of you explain a little bit about who you have the hobby? This is one.
That you can't have a groundwater exceedance regardless of the size of your farm?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Well, 151 is going through a rewrite too right now. So, yeah, there are. So I think the big takeaway is, especially with groundwater monitoring, it's just a tool. It really is just a tool. And it only tells you what's going on subsurface, and it doesn't stop sources. It doesn't improve operational or maintenance issues. It doesn't fix holes in lagoons or pipes or anything else. So it's kind of like a part of the bigger picture when it comes to analyzing what's going on a farm. Big, small, whatever.
another big part of the whole thing, there's a lot of things to do with the fact. Besides what comes from the farm, now, I had a lot of land along Highway 35. And from your transportation, there's pollution and everything. And the difference between land along there and a mile away was, the pollution was really high along that. In fact, if you have a house or something to sell along Highway 35 and some of these, you have to have, when you test a well for like saleable property or something, you just about have to always put on, something for, clean water.
Sure. 90%, about 90% of Wisconsin's nitrate in groundwater comes from agriculture. We don't really divide it out as to what type of agriculture, and we've got just about every type of agriculture that you can think of. So it's to reduce nitrates in groundwater, it's a joint effort from everyone. It's not just one industry, it's not just one farmer, it's not just one watershed. It's like the whole picture. And approaching it that way is definitely something that hasn't really been explored in a great deal up until now, but we're starting to look at how to be very inclusive with decision making and reductions across the board. You know, it's if we've got a nitrate issue to fix, then it's going to take more than one. So.
Thank
Okay.
you, Zoe.
You are most welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
So both of you are basically located out of Baldwin.
Yep, that is correct.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I ask one last question?
You may, Amy.
Hey, Zoe, thank you very much for such a great presentation. I really appreciate it. And not to belabor the mortality topic, but can you just answer this question I have is there a way during composting and disposal of dead bodies that something, say, like an African swine flu fever is destroyed, or does that have potential for getting into ground or surface waters?
Yeah, we generally
Thank you.
don't say destroyed. We say deactivated because the mechanism that generally affects viruses in composting is more of a breakup of the communication pathway of the virus and the ability of it to be available to a vulnerable receptor. So heat deactivation is the primary function that we go for, and therefore the temperature monitoring is very intensive and important in that process. We also do multiple turns of the compost to make sure that all surfaces are being contacted optimally so that we're not getting cool spots in the pile. And again, the temperature monitoring does tend to help us pick up on that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think at 12 o'clock we'll take a 10-minute break. Something maybe to bring this in perspective to how things have changed so quickly. I think everybody knows of farmers, you know, they always had in our history, they had a manure spreader and a plow. And right now, I don't know farmers that have got either one. The farmers, they all have a system where they have where they have tillage equipment. Nobody's got a plow anymore, and things have changed so rapidly. I started out like in 1960 with 25 cows and 15 heifers, and by 1990, when I quit, I had 5 liquid manure pits. All my cattle was on slats and everything. And farming is so difficult now that you don't see any small farms. And I think from what we've seen here, now the answer is right there. Why there's not many small farms anymore.
Like I said, the definition of things was that 1,000 animal units.
Okay, there it goes. Okay, so like I said before, the definition of a CAFO is 1,000 animal units. We've had hog farms move into the Russ County, Taylor County, Clark County areas that are at like 900 animal units. So I think that's important to understand. So I know that we tend to focus on the CAFO aspect of things, but it's also important to understand that you have these larger operations that can be just under, and perhaps they could be designed that way. So knowing that that making sure that you're implementing your 151 rules within the county, within a township, is also important as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because I told Tanya that I would say something about that. So
Once again, on behalf of our county, we appreciate you coming up here so very, very much. So we'll take a 10-minute break, okay, and then we'll come back with number 11. This is the first time we've had a meeting that's lasted over 12 o'clock, so, but it was well worth it. I guess our 10 minutes is up, so we'll try and get settled down and go through the rest as quick as we can. The item B, 11B, Jason, would that address you, conditional permits and?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In everybody's packets with the agenda today, we've put on a table and that compares the CUP process through the zoning side compared to an operations-based ordinance. In your packet, you also have a sample or an example draft of an operations-based ordinance that Malia drafted for the county. It's basically the same, as I understand, to the town of Eureka's ordinance. It's just been replaced in that to include the statutory authority for a county to be able to enforce it. And then there's also a clause in there that if for some reason the swine portion of that ordinance, and that is not legal or lawful, that then the whole ordinance would be removed so that it cannot apply to dairy and other types of livestock. One of the main advantages to the operations-based ordinance is that would apply countywide, whereas the CUP process only applies to areas that are under county zoning. So, and with that, I don't have a lot of other information, so I'm just willing to open it up for questions.
And Jason, your office has material and presentations where people can stop at your office. You could probably spend an hour here on some of the details. I've got it on. If I guess I got to speak into it. So there's a lot of information in your office, and I invite people to stop in and get some more information on some particular items.
Nope.
Any question for Jason? Brian, are you part of the presentation with Jason?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Kazmersky, and I'm the Environmental Services Director. What Jason had mentioned and referred to you is we took the time, and we include this in your packet, a comparison between a conditional use ordinance as well as an operational based ordinance. And because right now there is some movement and some incentive to look at an operational based ordinance. Eric Wojcik is here as well, and he's here as a resource for a site-specific ordinance, if that's our third alternative to look at as well. Like Jason mentioned, one of the key differences between an operational-based and a CUP is the county coverage. An operational base would apply to the entire county, whereas a CUP would only apply to those towns under county zoning authority. Another key difference is the oversight. With the operational based ordinance. Health and Human Services would provide that administration. With a conditional use permit, that would be zoning. With the citing ordinance, it'd be land and water, primarily Eric. So I just wanted to point that out. And then there's also some differences in terms of those financial insurances that is a concern for some in the broader community. But yeah, we're just here via invitation to answer any questions as you guys look and compare the three different alternatives in terms of regulating large-scale livestock operations.
So the reason why they are here today is they are the key people to the permits in the county. And so we certainly appreciate that. And busy your schedule is, we thank you for participating. It's been a long morning. So thanks, guys. Kathy, then you want to go to C, child support and Dr. Chad.
All right, I'll give you a summary on child support, veteran services, just the areas there. Let me pull up my stuff here. Child support, the big note on that one is going to be state aids. We're off by roughly $100,000. That fluctuates from what I've told. It fluctuates quite a bit from what I'm told year to year.
Quite a bit.
So that really put them over budget because of that state aid revenue being off. It was budgeted for around 760 and they came in, or budgeted for around 860, they came in around 760. So that affected them. Veteran services, let me get that screen pulled up here. All right, veteran services, a little bit over budget, but on their veteran services grant, and then that reserve they have for like emergency services for vets. So with that, their grant, they get $10,000 a year. That's untouchable. If they don't use it up, it rolls over. They rolled over about $6,000 into this year from last year. The $1,800 that the county gives them under, I think it's Chapter 54, they only spent about $360 of it. So that remainder rolls over. That fund is approaching $30,000. And that's like the energy assistance and all that kind of stuff. That fund is really growing to a pretty sizable amount, and they're spending less than what they're allocated under Chapter 54. So I leave that to the board, but that is probably something to look at that keeps growing and is not going down. So I guess that's probably just a discussion, how could that money be spent?
So Chad, the structure of child support, especially back years ago, Jeff Fuge was in charge of child support, and from the court recommendations on down. Is that your responsibility now?
No, that falls to Malia. Malia oversees Corporation Counsel and
I
child
thought that
support.
was a corporation
And then
counsel.
Joe Loso, Assistant Corporation Counsel. I believe he has more day-to-day oversight of child support.
I imagine most of it would, from the court system, would fall to him.
Yes, sir, it would.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Let's see, I've done veteran services, child support. I guess we'll talk about community services as a whole. One thing that I think is important to mention is, that's a big division that has public health, it has behavioral health, it has ADRC, veteran services actually falls in it. ADRC, tends to do pretty well. Their transportation fund increased to about 96,000 in 2019. Now, Laura has put that to work this year. She placed an extra order for bikes this year, which Vince approved because it comes out of that restricted fund. So they're actually delivering twice as many bikes as they have in the past. And she's still got a healthy fund there. Behavioral health and a couple other areas of community service were down. We had to transfer, I'm trying to get you the exact number, $113,687 from the general fund to offset those. You know, we have a policy that requires Children and Family Services Fund and the Health Services Fund to zero out to go back to the general fund at the end of the year. But if they're short, we transfer from the general fund to it. Although we transferred 113,000 to offset those areas, Children and Family Services actually had a surplus of $202,400 this year and transferred it to the general fund. So their net was just roughly over 80,000, 87,000 that they transferred back. I think this is especially important to point out. Last year, you all may or may not recall, we had to transfer 600 and I think it's about 670,000 from the general fund to the DCF fund because of placements and all.
Yeah.
So that's just a incredible turnaround. Now, you know, Tanya likes to say that they don't have a ton of control over placements, but I think they've done a lot of work down there to control those placements.
Placements is the most expensive part of.
Right. So, I mean, really, you're talking about an $800,000 shift. That's a pretty substantial shift in 1 year.
So as with these transfers now, as a general outlook, like what do you, our sales tax in that for the month of July? What's the report on?
So we are actually doing well on sales tax and property tax. We're roughly 40,000 ahead on sales tax this time last year. Property tax, we've collected roughly just shy of where we were in the prior 2 years. So it appears everybody's paying their property tax on time. We're carrying about the same amount of, I think it's around 3.7 million in uncollected tax debt right now, which is about where we were last year. So we've done pretty well there holding the line. The sales tax for our area of Wisconsin has fared well better than even Eau Claire and those kind of places.
That's kind of the report of what we got down at the state highway. We were, Jay Luke and I were down in Wisconsin Dells for a conference last Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And of the 5 largest counties in Wisconsin, 4 of them were at last year's level or even a little bit above. I believe one was Milwaukee, I think.
Right.
That's kind of the attitude of the state, so.
But I'd remember sales tax tracks 60 days behind.
Yeah.
But it's tracking very well. You know, we're hopeful that it continues to track the way it is.
Any other questions for Chad? Otherwise, we'll move on to Dana. Do you have a report on Golden Age?
So Jonathan Sherwood, our auditor, our lead auditor, is actually on. He'll be providing the overview of the Golden Age Manor audit. I also provided a copy of to each of the board members on your desk, a copy of the audit. And then Dana and I are available for any questions. No, it's the PDF, the financial report I had you pull up.
Okay, moving on.
Hello there. Can everybody hear me?
We can, Jonathan.
All right, fantastic. I'm asking for control here if I can. I do have a PowerPoint brief synopsis of the audit report, if I can pull that up possibly.
Sure, we appreciate that.
1 second, Jonathan, let IT
Yep.
finish.
Thank you. By the time this, as this gets rolling, I just want to thank everybody for being flexible and allowing me to present to you virtually. This is a big help for me and being able to meet your needs as well. So I very much appreciate that. All right, so I think if I click on this, I should be able to show this.
Amy, can you still hear us?
Yep, sounds great. Thank you for checking.
All right, and then can everybody see my Golden Age Manor PDF PowerPoint here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, fantastic. So if anybody has any questions as I go along, please jump in and stop me. I'm more than happy to address comments. But I know that I also have Dana's in the room, as well as Chad can hopefully chime in here too if any specific questions that I might not be able to answer immediately. as well. So just at a high level, again, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here virtually. Again, it helps us out tremendously in juggling our schedules and reducing travel, which is fantastic outside of our whole COVID-19 pandemic issues here. And then just a brief comment on the whole way that our audit had to basically drastically change how we were doing things this year. Normally, we're on site and getting in the way of the majority of the staff at Golden Age Manor, but due to COVID restrictions and lockdown requirements, we actually had to do this whole audit virtually, which presented its own challenges. But again, I want to thank Dana and the rest of the staff there at Golden Age Manor that worked very diligently to respond to all of our informational requests, different phone calls, and different issues that we had to work through, which is typically a little easier to do in person, but virtually it worked out as well as to be expected. So thank you very much for that. So as I jump into some of the numbers here, I also have a few senior living trends as an industry that Clifton Larson Allen is involved very extensively in the area. Just some different trends that we're seeing as well that I'll share with you briefly. So to start off, I just wanted to give you an executive summary of the audit report there that you see in front of you. If you have any specific questions on anything within there, please stop me. But without putting you to sleep too much and respecting everybody's time here, I know this is a long meeting, I'll keep these comments as high level as possible. So first off, when we do an audit as an outside independent auditor, we strive to issue an opinion that we refer to as an unmodified opinion. What that means is it's a clean opinion. There's no concerns or anything that we have over the amounts or the disclosures within the financial statements of Golden Age Manor. The significant transactions that I have listed up here, which I'll comment extensively on, just to hopefully give some clarity on the operations of Golden Age Manor, is the Wisconsin retirement pension items. And then as we look at the internal controls of how things are operating at Golden Age, we actually issue a report over the internal controls of the facility as well. And during our examination of the internal controls, we actually report to is what accountants and auditors refer to as two material weaknesses. So these are, if anybody's unfamiliar with these, they're they're recurring items in this case, but these are items that are raised to a level of significance that requires me by audit standards to present to you and just present on. Neither of these two issues are anything that I would say is a major red flag. As I mentioned, these are repeat items from prior years, and it's basically due to the size of the staff that we have down there and just some of the day-to-day operations of the typical how Golden Age Manor operates. Nothing here I would say needs to be changed, but the level of significance is there where you as a committee should be aware of them, and then you're paying attention to some of the other internal controls that compensate for these material weaknesses. And then briefly, a comment that I wanted to point out is the COVID-19 impact on Golden Age Manor. So to get started on understanding the industry, just a couple of nuggets here, high-level comments, hopefully for you, not bogging you down too much. Nice grid here. The first one that I'll talk about is the payment transformation. This basically relates to how Golden Age Manor is getting paid or reimbursed in this case from Medicare. So the way that they used to get paid has now transformed, or it's changing a little bit, effective for 2019. Then we've got a nice little demographics growth chart of who are Golden Age Manor's customers, so to speak, and kind of what the pipeline of what the future demographics are going to look like as they move into Golden Age Manor and those types of facilities. Then something as an industry nationwide, it's also being felt here in Northwest Wisconsin and the greater Minnesota area at large as well, is the workforce pressures. What is the issue there is the talent that we need there, those highly skilled individuals, healthcare providers, there's just a lack of them. There's a high demand for them. So kind of the struggles and the challenges there and kind of how that impacts the costs of Golden Age Manor. And then lastly, big data and technology is definitely an issue for Golden Age Manor. And what we mean by this specific bullet point is specifically is the coding has changed recently as to a provided service in the medical billing world. I think the stats are somewhere between, we used to be able to bill out using these medical codes of, anywhere from 15 to 20,000 different medical codes in the healthcare industry in total. They were being billed on that rate. However, recently the changes for Medicare and Medicaid has basically greatly expanded that, and they went to a more of an international billing model, so to speak. So those codes have increased from that $15,000 to $20,000, 20,000 different codes or level of services. It's expanded upwards of like 70,000 different medical treatments that can be billed out. So that's just increasing the pressure on skilled nursing facilities, reporting to the different agencies, and basically what is that going to mean? Is that's kind of the big question mark as to why we're doing all of this, or why that big push was made. And it's basically a data, they're collecting a bunch of data. Different agencies are going to be reviewing this data as to what the most common medical code billings and where the trends are going. So we'll be seeing that impact in future years as to different policy decisions at a national and regional level. So to speak more specifically on the payment transportation, that's our next slide here. This is Medicare's changing reimbursement process. So basically this just means that the Medicare's rates have basically shifted a little bit. So in total, the theory is that your Medicare rates technically shouldn't change all that much, but just the way in which that being reimbursed is different. It used to be based on X number of like 15 minutes versus a level of service. You'd be able to bill that time out, and now the reimbursement rate is just rolled up into Medicaid rates in total. Outside of that, the next thing that I wanted to discuss with you here, our demographic growth, and I'm going to enlarge this. Hopefully you can still see this a little bit better. But this is who is covered by Medicare in 2016 is the last good statistics that we had available to us. So Medicare, again, this chunk of people that are between the ages of 65 and 64 is obviously the vast majority of those people. And obviously, as the population ages, they shift into this next greatest area here. But the trend is going to be for your Medicare type eligible patients is they're going to be that next group of people, or that first group of people, that 65 to 74 is going to be basically the target for Medicare patients. And then within those Medicare eligible people, the majority of them are under Medicare, 68% of them that we're seeing here. But then the other remaining 32% over here is Medicare Advantage. So they also have a Medicare supplement policy out there that's administered through a private health insurance provider. So I know that in this case, the different providers, so in this case, Golden Age Manor is going to basically have one set of negotiations with Medicare for Medicare rates that we're saying these are what our Medicare rates are versus the different rates that we can negotiate with these Medicare Advantage type programs. The other top 10 chronic conditions over here on the right, this is a national average, so this is everybody, but the demographics here as well, this is typically the different chronic conditions that we're going to be seeing entering into our facilities. So that's just going to help us determine at Golden Age Manor's level what types of chronic conditions we're going to end up needing to treat or be able to take care of these types of folks. So I don't think it's anybody's surprise here, maybe it is for some people in the room, that high blood pressure is the number one chronic condition there of Americans. And then these are just the top 10 that we see down the list. No real surprises when I first read them, but I thought it was definitely something of note and at least of interest to keep us awake here this morning. And then I'll back this up a little bit here for you. All right, so here's a little occupancy rate too. This is showing us a trend. And our two different charts here. The one on the left here is assisted living facilities, and the one on the right here is independent living facilities. Without describing this graph in too much detail and getting us too confused here, basically the trend nationally over the last number of years, the blue bars here is the total inventory available or total bed occupancies for assisted living facilities. That's the blue bar. The orange bar is the absorption or the usage of those assisted living or of those beds. So said another way, you can see that the inventory, the number of assisted living facility beds has been increasing over the last number of years, while the usage of those beds hasn't kept the same increase or the same trajectory. So and then you can see conversely on the other side of things is the independent living beds. The number of those beds has remained pretty flat, increased a little bit. However, the usage has followed suit with them and actually increased as a total percentage. So what this is basically saying is over the last number of years, assisted living facility, the need and the desire to use a full assisted living facilities has actually decreased. There's been a push to move assisted living or the typical assisted living. The preference is to go with independent living with a push for home health care versus the old trend, so to speak, used to be everybody went into assisted living facilities, and that's the level of care that they were expecting. Even as far back as 2006, as that kind of made sense, is if we had an open bed, we had somebody to fill that bed. Well, that's not necessarily the same trend that we're seeing here in 2018, and then going forward in 2019, we're expecting the same trend to continue. So that's our couple of trends that I wanted to discuss here. Let me back up here and continue to speak on the results of the actual Golden Age Manor results for 2019. I'll switch over to this screen here. And this is direct excerpts out of your audit report. So to speak specifically on the two findings that I mentioned earlier, this is just the nomenclature that we use. So you've got limited segregations of duties, and then the second finding that we have, or material weakness that we have, is material audit adjustments. So these are just two things that we noticed that when during the course of our audit that we just have to, again, bring to your level of attention. Some of the material audit adjustments specifically are related to the Wisconsin retirement items that I mentioned earlier, and I'll discuss those here real quickly. So to start off, let's just take a look at, in the 2019 column here, obviously, what your change in net position would be. So down here, we're showing that we have a loss. We're showing that Golden Age Manor lost to $207,000 for the year. Now, I'm going to temper that with two items that I've basically highlighted here. The first being depreciation. So typically when most people are looking at the results from operation, depreciation is a non-cash item. We're not physically writing a check out the door every year for depreciation. When we buy an asset, we're buying equipment, that kind of thing. We're spending cash, yes, but we're bringing that on as an asset. And this, as our assets age, that's what depreciation represents. So theoretically, a lot of people back this out of your loss. So this is a negative to your bottom line. The other item that we'll discuss in more detail is those WRS items, Wisconsin retirement items. Those are also non-cash items. We're not writing a check for the change in some of these balance sheet or some of these financial statement issues. And that impact to this total expenditure line is $323,000. That's a hit against the total expenses line. So those two items, your WRS and your depreciation expense, if you deduct that from our total loss, this $207,000 loss, that actually flips to about a $323,000 income for the year of operations. So for the way that I like to think about it too is the things that we can control at Golden Age Manor of your total costs that you're physically writing a check for on a day-to-day basis versus the total revenue coming in the door, we actually have a net positive for the year. So that's another way of looking at it. Looking at the operating loss here that I have boxed in here, it does look sort of alarming that we have a results from operation of a loss of $1.3 million. This is then offset by the supplemental payment program revenue of $1.2 million. So I know this is a very common thing. This obviously happened in 2018 and going back for many, many years. What this supplemental payment program revenue is, as a reminder, is that's the Medicaid reimbursement kind of catch-up program, if you will, that's municipally owned, county-owned nursing homes in the state of Wisconsin for those Medicaid patients. It's kind of a catch-up, or trying to make you equal for the Medicare or Medicaid patients that are out there versus the Medicaid rates that are that are reimbursed. This is just basically to make up for that shortfall of what it actually costs to treat those patients versus what Medicaid actually reimbursed up front. Without that specific program in place, obviously it would be pretty hard to cash flow from one year to the next. But thankfully the program is there, and it's to the tune of $1.2 million here in 2019. The next slide that I have here, I wanted to highlight to my previous point that although the results back on the previous page looks on paper that there was a shortfall of about $207,000 in total operations, I'd like to point out that cash flow from operations, meaning cash in versus cash out, we actually had a net positive, or we added to our checkbook balance at the end of the year, which is a positive trend here, both in 18 and 19. We added about $70,000 to the actual checkbook that we can use to pay our operating expenditures. So to further drive home the point that those two non-cash items have a very dramatic impact when looking at an audit, you can see the numbers right here. As the total non-cash items of total depreciation expense and the net change, or in this case, the expenses surrounding the WRS pension items. So in 2019, the very dramatic increase in WRS of $332,000 is making a very dramatic impact on that first set of financial statements that I was showing you. And to highlight exactly where you see a couple of items here now, this is your balance sheet. So these are all the balances on hand as of 12/31/19. You've got your cash balance that I wanted to point out. Again, the positive thing is cash is increasing. That's always a positive thing. You're meeting your liabilities of paying your employees and your suppliers, and then you have additional cash to put in the bank at the end of the year is always a positive thing. Here is exactly where you're seeing those WRS items dramatically impacting you on your income statement, and this is where it's being reflected now on your balance sheet. In 2018, we actually were reporting an asset for the net pension asset for the WRS items. That actually flipped to a liability during 2019. A little bit quick further background on WRS here. This is it's Golden Age Manor's share of the county at large portion of the WRS system, which is the statewide system. So in other words, WRS is this giant system for the state. We're taking down what the total county portion is, and then we have to allocate down exactly what Golden Age Manor's portion of this is. So from the big giant system of WRS in Madison to Polk County to Golden Age Manor, we're seeing that this is what the liability basically has been changing or growing from one year to the next. So in 18, we had an asset. Now we're reporting a liability. And we see this liability is on this following page, $719,000 for 2019. Then a couple of brief comments just on the results in 2019 is from an operations standpoint. Like I said, we do basically have a net positive results from operations of about $323,000 for the year, even with a few contributing factors here. The first box that I have highlighted here is just the occupancy rates for Golden Age Manor. You can see the total occupancy actually decreased by about 9%. However, the Medicaid and Medicare portions or total occupancy of those two subsets was very consistent from one year to the next, just down slightly in Medicaid and then about equal in Medicare. The next note that I wanted to pull out for you, just so everybody to keep on the same page, as far as the operations of Golden Age Manor, is the long-term debt / the advances from the county. So in this case, we had this long outstanding advance that was taken out in 2007 to help fund capital replacement items. We're down to about a $12,000 balance in 19, and I know in 20 that has been paid off probably at this point. It's actually payable through December 2020 if I read my note here for us. During 2019, however, we actually took out another advance from the general county for $168,000 for a boiler project, and the payment on that advance doesn't stretch out nearly as long as the prior one. That was in the prior one was 2007 through 2020. This new advance was taken out in 19, and it will be fully repaid by December of 2021. So a much shorter turnaround on that one. And I think the reason, one of the reasons for that shorter repayment schedule is because of the positive results from operations that we've cited over the last number of years. And then lastly, just a quick comment here on the subsequent event. It's a large enough item that I wanted to address it and present it to the committee here, that subsequent to year end, so not reported in these financial statements at all. Obviously, Golden Age Manor did go out and secure the PPP loan to help fund operations in 2020 and try to kind of offset the additional costs and some loss of revenue there. So any impact on those will be presented in the 2020 audit. That concludes my comments here for you for this morning. Are there any questions or comments for me to address?
I want to thank you for that. I'd like to see some audit, good audit. I'd like to see some suggestions.
So,
I'm sorry, I think I can only hear Chad at this point.
so Mr. Chair, I do want to, this, sometimes this kind of gets lost and we feel like the auditors can do this. Our auditors can only attest to the presentation of our statements and our financial because they're auditing and not providing assurance, which is divided since the Enron fiasco with SOX. They can't give us like warning signs or we think you should do this. That kind of assurance then falls to Dana and myself as the general government director. So when we fail to do that, it's on us. But I do want to point out CLA, it's not that they don't do it for us. They're not allowed to by our accounting standards to do it.
So that concludes the Golden Age Manor on our agenda. Is that correct, Chad?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, the update on community health improvement plans.
Yep.
Kathy, would you address that?
Yep, that is me. I'll be handing out 2020 Community Health Improvement Plan, or CHIP for short. This is also on our website. So there's Polk United, the Mental Health Task Force, a lot of our other healthcare organizations also assist in this. They have 3 things that they work on, and includes mental health, substance use, and then physical activity. So there's a lot of great information in here. When you look at the specific goals, I think they start on page 21, and it kind of talks about their goal they have and what they're doing to work on these goals. And this plan is usually a 5-year plan. So I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into it, or if you guys just want to review this on your
I
own.
think we can take some time. We can take that home and our usual off-campus study.
Sounds good, because yeah, like I said, lots of great
If we have
information.
some questions, we can bring that up next week or next
month.
month. And one other thing, that the report on Golden Age Manor, if you have people as supervisors, if you have questions from general public, this is available to the general public. We can get this at the clerk's office, or through, we can provide that as supervisors, correct? Anything else, Kathy?
Not unless there's anything specific you have.
We'll study that and probably bring some questions back. And thanks for that, the packet that you brought to us.
Yep.
The next one on the agenda is number F, update from our very confident County Clerk Lisa Ross regarding something about minutes. Want to address that, Lisa? Got the green light.
Got the green light. I won't take up too much of your time. One of the things I've noticed with the Health and Human Services Committee since I was taking minutes there is there's a continual discussion that keeps arising regarding the detailed minutes or lack thereof going forward. So I just wanted to address that as the county clerk. When I started, we were advised by corporate counsel to keep that less is more for legal reasons. The standards that we use are pretty widely accepted, at least throughout the state of Wisconsin. And we follow the Wisconsin County Clerks Association guidelines, the Wisconsin Counties Association 2020 Appointed Officials Handbook, Robert's Rules of Order. The way that they state that the minutes need to be done, that's our basis of it. So they're not an official, they're not a transcript of the meeting. They're just they are the official record of the proceedings of the meeting. So it's for motions, not elaborate descriptions on what was said. Essentially, we focus on what the committee did, not what they said. So I just wanted to make some clarifications because I know this topic keeps coming back up, and I have 2 brand new clerks working for me. So just wanted to make sure that that clarification was made. Is there any questions about them? Yeah.
So
If anybody needs any detailing in that, they can always go and watch it on video.
Yep, and we actually rewatch it some of the time,
Yep.
and we have questions about what order things happen in. So yep, that's a great resource.
thanks for that information. Fran, did you have something?
I was just gonna reiterate what Joe said. I was,
Oh my goodness. Awesome.
yeah,
All right.
same thing.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty outstanding, you're relatively new and your staff is relatively new, and so we appreciate all the cooperation. Thank you. The number 12A, Jason, would that be part of your presentation, or I know you're busy in your office.
No. No, I have not seen that resolution.
Mr. Chair, I can address that.
Go ahead, Amy.
So this is just the motion that we passed at our last meeting, and then corporate counsel turned it into a resolution, and we just wanted to give you that status that it's going to go before the full board in September. So that's just a little update.
So the September full county board meeting will take that into finalization.
Correct, that's right.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Good enough. Then we can move on to B, discussion and consideration draft ordinance. So if there isn't any more questions, that would suffice on that one, correct? So we can move on to 13, action items, review and recommendation on fee schedule and leases, and that would be you, wouldn't it, Jason? Fee
Nope,
schedule?
that's us. That's me.
Oh, Kathy,
Yep.
okay. Oh, fee schedules within the.
Yep, for,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if Tanya sent anything over, but we actually don't have any changes we're gonna be putting forward, keep it the same. We looked at, our costs that we have, what reimbursement is for billable to insurance and stuff like that. And at this time, we feel all of our fees that we are charging out between behavior health and public health are okay to stay the same this year.
Yeah, I didn't see where there was any change, so I just need a clarification on that. So we're getting to 14 matters for our September meeting. I'm sure we've got quite a few of them that we went through today. So anybody from the staff or supervisors to September, otherwise somebody will be, he usually contacts me if any supervisors have talked to me about putting anything on the agenda. Jason, have you got some things for the September meeting?
I do have one thing, Mr. Chair. There was a resolution that had been done in 2019, and so it's some back dating or some old information. The resolution that was done in 2019 wanted staff to look at amending the public human health hazard ordinance and public nuisance ordinances. And that was at the executive committee meeting last Thursday. And the executive committee, I don't think it wants this to be on a fast track, but they would like to take and direct Health and Human Services to take and start working on the amendment to these ordinances. And at your next meeting, we would like it if it could be on the agenda and we could just kind of get your guys' input as a committee, and we can have our county planner in here to kind of do some steering or to make sure that we're going down the right track. And then internally, we'd like to involve the other departments that are involved with the enforcement. So it'd be public health and our sheriff or somebody from law enforcement. We also we're going to have a county board supervisor on this committee, and we could take and work on the ordinance in-house. But we'd just like to have some more direction from you guys at the committee level at your next meeting. So.
I keep pushing the wrong button there.
Yes, and we do have a draft ordinance and that with some amendments and that would be in your packet for that next meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jason.
And Mr. Chair, I had an item also.
Okay, Amy.
We have a hanging item from our last meeting, which was the Bill Oliva, I think it was a motion where we had that WCA recommendations for the Bayfield CAFO research project, and Bill passed, we passed that out of committee, and I don't know really exactly the process, if we should turn that into resolution and send it on up to the full board, or if that automatically, I'm not sure what we did with that. We said we passed it and we liked it as a recommendation, but we might need more clarity on, or maybe we can just turn it into resolution now and just bring it back as a draft. How about that?
I sat in, I'm on the steering committee of the WCA, and I was on a 2-hour conference one day on that, and we got some information from the different counties around the state and what's going on in some of the counties, particularly Bayfield. And it seemed to be that there's a lot more information being generated on some of the things that involved. So I don't know if Bill, if you got any comments as if we're ready to proceed on that. I think the general consensus is that we're still gathering a lot of information as to how to proceed and really make it legal. Go ahead, Bill.
We passed that resolution on to the Environmental Services Committee for review. What did that committee do with that item?
Vince, do you know anything about that?
It was not discussed at the Environmental Services Committee, if I recall.
Does that would be the action we're waiting for then, Bill, and for it to be on their agenda. You have a comment, Bob?
Yes, John. Chairman Bonaprise, we both attended that virtual WCA meeting. And you're right, you're on the steering committee for the environmental services piece or a subcommittee within Wisconsin Counties Association. That resolution was forwarded on. Do you remember voting for that? It was a statewide virtual meeting, which states that and it was sponsored by Bayfield County to have a statewide 2-year moratorium on all CAFOs and also ask that additional resources be provided to those state agencies that oversee CAFOs, like our colleagues here today, DADCAP and DNR, and also that a statewide research study be completed within those 2 years and brought to the state legislature. So I'm just sharing all that with you now because the motion that was brought forth from this committee, essentially it is happening at the state level through your professional organization. So there is some redundancy. However, if you'd like for me to include it on the next environmental services agenda, I certainly can.
And the Wisconsin counties seminar was going to be held the 21st, 22nd of September in Wisconsin Dells, but that has now been canceled. So I think things are, as far as the resolutions, we just don't know where we're at on that.
Well, that goes to the executive committee with WCA at their annual meeting here in late September. I believe that's still being held, but it is virtual.
It is all moving forward, and so I think that's where we're at is we're waiting for that.
And the WCA did just, I think it was yesterday, send out a list of all of their kind of virtual meetings, and there is specifically a one on CAFO, and I can't pull it up right now to find the date, but I'll find it before the end of this meeting and share it.
So as a steering committee, we're supposed to meet every 3 months. And I believe, Bob, I think our next one is scheduled for October.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, Amy, I hope that answers that, how everything's being proceeded on that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for the update, Bob.
It's October 19th, Monday, October 19th is the virtual meeting, virtual conference for the virtual annual conference specific workshop on CAFOs.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. And if nothing else, I think we can finally have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Duncan, seconded by Supervisor Oliva. All in favor, say aye. Motion adjourned, carried, unanimous. And thanks for our about an hour of overtime today. First time we haven't adjourned by 12 o'clock, but it was well worth it. So remember, this Golden Age Manor audit is available for anybody